Architect Vivek for a brief introduction about architect Vijay Ramachandran and start hands-on sketching trial interaction program. Over to you, Vivek, sir.
Thank you, Arjun, and very good evening, all of you. So again, we are meeting on screen. We thought last time when we met on screen, we thought next meeting would be in person. But I am sure we are soon going to announce our next in-person meeting that will be on October 9th. Today we are very, very lucky to have a very, very special person and my good friend, architect Vijay Ramachandran, here to share some of his wonderful experiences with pen, paper, and pencil. So my duty is to introduce architect Vijay. Before that, let me thank Arjun Narayanan, our convener for hands-on sessions, for continuously pursuing and making this very, very special session happen. And he was very instrumental in taking the hands-on initiative to good heights by conducting 3-4 on-site sketching sessions. Now I hope all of you will get inspired by Vijay and take your sketchbook and pencil tomorrow itself and start sketching on streets right away. Architect and urban designer Vijay is the co-founder with Sunita Kondur at 100 Hands, a multidisciplinary design studio based in Bangalore. It was established in 2003. Having worked on a wide variety of projects ranging from cafe interiors to apartment buildings and institutions, the studio's design approach is rooted in focusing on the urban context through the medium of scale, character, spatial and visual impact, and the remaking of the public domain. 100 Hands has won multiple awards, which include an official selection for the Project South exhibition and the Leon Di Petra in Venice Biennale 2006. And the Cityscape Architectural Review Award in 2005. Vijay was a panelist at the annual All India Undergraduate Thesis Review, the Kurlavaki Design Forum at CEPT, Ahmedabad in 2006 and 2014. He currently serves as the design chair at BMS College of Architecture, Bangalore, and advisor at Avani Institute of Design, Calicut. Vijay has a bachelor's degree in architecture from BMS College, Bangalore University, and a master's degree from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cambridge, USA, in architecture and urbanism, and has attended the Glen Market Masterclass. And to conduct this, I am sure we won't get a better person because the first time, I don't know whether Vijay, you remember it, the first time we were actually spending some good, I was way junior then, it was like 10, 15 years back, 10, 12 years back, when Thrissur IIA conducted the Residence Next workshop. And we had 5 teams working on a very special residential concept. And I was in the Ragesh Ranganathan's team, and then Nishan was there in Madurai Pramathaligay's team, and Brijesh was there in Shilpa Rangade's team, and there were a bunch of us very passionately working on something. And we were all working on sketches, we were all working on discussions, talking, and there were a lot of laptops around. But there was one man who was working on pile-ups of butter sheets, and that was Vijay. He was sitting on a corner of his space in that it was a nice heritage space where we were all working on. He was sitting on one corner and sketching our and butter sheet over the butter sheet and butter sheet and butter sheet. So that is when I came to personally exposed to the wonderful opportunities and possibilities of sketches in design. And I think even in the final design presentation, Vijay's team's presentation stood out completely because it was from scratch to the sketches, talking about a completely different design narrative at the end. It was a mesmerizing presentation. I still remember that presentation you did it on stage, Vijay. And I'm very, very excited to see one year again. Thank you, Vijay, for joining, and it's my pleasure to introduce you. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Vivek. That's very nice of you. Nice introduction. And yes, I remember that time at Residence Next very fondly. It was an incredible, 3 days, away from everything, just a chance to sit and draw. And yeah, a great group of people. I mean, I remember vividly all the teams and their, the way that they were approaching based on the mentors. So thanks for that introduction and for reminding me of that wonderful time. Also, thanks to Arjun and IIA Calicut Center. Arjun Also apologies. I mean, we've been running around, trying to organize this. Also, just a word of caution for those of you who, in fact, yesterday someone had emailed me saying that I'm really looking forward to this workshop session. And it isn't really a sketching workshop session online, because I think those would be better done on site somewhere together. What I've done today is to put together maybe 4 projects, I think, and just to show you a few of the process drawings before we come to the final scheme, to show you how maybe these drawings have helped us come to that kind of resolution. Yeah, so that just a word of caution. But thanks again, Vivek, and thanks, Arjun. And so I'll just share the screen. Also, yeah, I'll just put it full screen. So also drawings, of course, when one thinks of drawings, one is always romantic about the traditional kind of drawing, which is, either using a pencil or a pen on paper, or like this image, where this is the great love story. The boy is about to go away to war, I think, and his lover is by candlelight tracing the silhouette of his face so that she will remember him. For me, there is actually another metaphor for this image as well, that all of us who are drawing sort of in the footsteps of our masters, that we trace over the section of Aalto's wonderful church, or we trace over the wonderful plan of the Melkote temple, or we trace over, I mean, in the act of drawing and in the act of tracing out things, we then get that into our blood and into our system and into our muscles, that then it becomes inseparable to us. And that's the great opportunity of drawing. And drawing could be any way. I mean, you could be drawing or making, but using your hands to do that. And in that effort of drawing, you are sort of imbibing and absorbing all the lessons of the great works. Like she is trying to sort of forever inscribe into her heart the image of her lover. So, drawing as a mode to make that kind of connection. Also, this wonderful thing, I had the great opportunity to attend Mercut's masterclass along with, Richard Leplastrier, Peter Stachbury, Britt Anderson, and I'll show you some of the drawings from that masterclass. But this is a wonderful quote from Mercut, who talks about drawing. To draw is to reveal is to understand is the beginning of knowledge. And once you understand how this thing fits, whatever you're trying to put into the landscape, you can't do that without drawing, to paraphrase what Mercut is saying, that drawing is the first step to reveal the hidden structures, the hidden meanings, and the appropriateness of one's action. So in a way, Mercut is telling us to sort of observe, to absorb, and then to speculate. And that's a wonderful lesson for a young architect, or for all of us, in fact, that if you were to just let your hand sort of reveal to you, what is. And so that word draw is a very nice word, because of course drawing is drawing, but also draw is to pull out. You're drawing out water of the well, or you're drawing out the pin from the softboard, or you're drawing, and so that act of drawing, to pull out, is also a nice metaphor for what it is to draw, to illustrate. And so to think of Richard Leplastrier and this beautiful drawing of the Ellora caves, Richard famously, in his younger days, rode a motorcycle across the breadth of India from Bombay to Calcutta, stopping en route in those days, of course, when there weren't any, not too many petrol pumps and probably not too many good roads either, that he'd hooked up these 2 canisters onto his motorcycle and rode across the country. And in that travel across the country, made drawings. And this is a beautiful drawing of Ellora. And what's beautiful about it, of course, it's a lovely drawing. It's got a certain kind of scale. And he would always make these drawings, which are plans and sections, to decipher what metaphorically these buildings mean. And for him, the way he reads the section of Ellora is quite profound. He says that when the young initiates, when the young monks come into the order, They occupy the lower floors of the Ellora cave. It's larger because, there's a big group of monks who sort of join. The cave is deeper. The image of the Buddha is deeper in the cell, so the light isn't very good. And also you enter through this gateway, and so your prospect out from within that space is also curtailed because of the gateway. And as you progress through the order, you come up to the top of Ellora, top of the cave. Of course, it's also structurally, better to do it this way. But as you come up and rise up to the upper floor of the Ellora caves, you now have prospect out to the horizon. There's more light on the Buddha, and so in a way, the drawing reveals the metaphor of this building. It tells you, or of this construct, that it tells you that as you get more senior in the order, that your vision is a bit less hindered, and there's more light at the end of the tunnel. So it's a beautiful metaphor, just capturing in the drawing itself the essential meanings of the order and its organization. So in like last year, and like a lot of course, in Kerala, and especially Vivek himself, wonderful sort of penmanship, amazing skill with the pen. But in the effort of drawing, on the one hand, of course, you're trying to decipher very, very clearly what you're seeing, but you're also trying to decipher, like Richard is, decipher what the plan organization is, or what the sections are, because these are the techniques that architects are using, or designers are using, or historically people are using to occupy space and to control time. So whenever, these are drawings that, I made a few years ago on a trip that I made in the north, and they're drawings that are primarily sections and plans in the way to sort of, understand what the organization is. And the big revelation for me on this trip, there were two big revelations. The one was the Sikandra tomb of Akbar, which, is the most profound experience that I have had in a building, going into that sort of sepulchral chamber right at the end of that axis. And for a moment thinking that I had transitioned into some other sort of realm, and finding it difficult to draw what that experience was, just sort of profoundly moving and shaken up a little bit. And the other great experience was the plan of the Jahangiri Mahal in the Red Fort. That's the middle page on the top. And that is like a little maze, and it's a beautiful architectural device where from the main court of the Haveli, which is where a lot of the concubines used to stay, that you come from that big court, the forecourt that opens out to the front as you enter the Red Fort, and then you come through that big court into a maze of rooms with diagonal connections across. And then it heightens your experience as you come out of this maze of rooms with a very, very low scale out onto a terrace, looking out onto the river and beyond onto the Taj Mahal. Gautam Bhatia mentions it in Silent Spaces, this idea of how you invert the notion of where the gaze is, or where you look out and you delay that sort of celebration. Of course, you see that a lot now in these wonderful resorts that so many of you, people from Kerala, etc., that you delay the sort of money shot in a way, that you obfuscate the transition so that you come in and you're really hit in the middle of your face, that, wow, look at that terrace, look at that view, and there's the Taj, So in delaying it, and how do you do that? How do you organize the plan? How do you create those sort of conditions? And so when you're out there sketching, one, of course, is to sketch what you're seeing, which is the sort of perspectival sketch. The other is really to decipher the organization of the plan, the structure, and the sections, and that then becomes really useful as a device. Also, the whole series of kinds of drawings that we make in the office, many of them are sort of made by me, but a lot of them also made by wonderful people who worked in the office. I have tried to, not missed, but I've tried to credit those people whose drawings are in this presentation. So this is one kind of drawing, which is a sort of conceptual drawing in pen on butter paper for a petition entry in Venice. This is the Venice Biennale thing that got selected to show at the Biennale, and it was about occupying the foot of this fort, this new part of the fort, and connected axially to the medieval city. This is another sort of initial sketch, again, pencil on paper, but this is for the Music Museum, a triangular site with a sort of huge retaining wall at the back. And I was thinking, of course, of Corbusier's beautiful drawing of the sort of violin strings in front of the bottles. I don't know the name of the tapestry that he designed, but we thought about this sort of back wall, a kind of wall which would contain all of the services. And up against that wall were the galleries, which were a lot more amorphous, free-flowing, free-form, creating then the frontage onto the street, but all organized thanks to this, sort of service bar at the back. And so the triangular shape of the site yielding this notion of a served and service, a served and master, dialogue for where the gallery is and where the services are. This is another kind of drawing, again, where this is a competition. Most of these sketches are from competition entries. This is for the Indian Institute of Science. We lost this project to CNT, but we really liked we explored this other way to draw, which we weren't usually doing. And so how do you draw it in a way to express, the notion of protection, of places of congregation, of shadow, through this kind of drawing. Sorry. There's yeah. And then these are not drawings per se, but they are also modes in which one is trying to express or represent to oneself what the project is about. And I'll come to this later when we're talking about Nalanda University and why these renderings are done in a certain way to evoke a certain quality of temperature, of light, and also to connect back historically to make it seem like it was archaic. So some of these notions are also, we are trying to express to the client what our central premises, the sort of more abstract ambitions that we have with the project, that we're trying to make it seem like as if it was always there, like a historical ruin that you were now occupying again for the university. So the way that the rendering has been done, this is Picture Plane, which is a fantastic rendering, agency in the UK, did it for us. This is the National War Museum. Again, another kind of drawing. This is in a way to signify that the building itself will be like the ramparts of the fort of the Red Fort, that it would have this kind of very, very opaque aspect to the south with all of the glazing onto the north, but these kind of really heavy masonry walls. So it felt like along that central axis that here was another ruin that had been discovered and was sort of revealed through this exercise. This kind of illustrations, we had a wonderful architect from Kamala Reheja who made these really sort of dreamlike, illustrations for a competition entry, which we won. This is for the Indian Institute of Science. This is Surabhi Banerjee, who has gone on to, become quite a successful illustrator on her own. But it is evocative at that level, so you're pushing the client to imagine. So in fact, we had this wonderful conversation, of course, completely nothing to do with the project. But the scientists who we were talking to immediately asked us, so are you going to do the building in mud? Is it going to be adobe? Is it going to be like these Mexican buildings that we've seen? And it evokes those qualities of being made by hand, this building. And of course, this kind of scale of project we may not, but it sort of is evoking those sensations of a kind of making, so choose the language you want to use to then convey to yourself and to others what the central premise of your project is. And of course, to make this beacon at the end of that site, that then as you come into the city, in fact, this is one of the nodal sort of entry points into the city, that you would have this beacon marking IISc as sort of the entry point to the city. And then, pencil drawings, this is a school that we did, and again, here, really the exercise of these drawings. So this is a set of drawings which then is coupled with that kind of a drawing. And these are to express to the client what is the idea of this. So it's not really, the image is not of the classrooms. It's about the stuff that's between the classrooms, filled with light, completely naturally ventilated. And with this, you can imagine almost that because this building is facing north and south, that the sun is moving across, and those shadows, and really it is like that, in a way. Now it's built, but you get a sense of this kind of, a notion that when you are in that space, you can measure time with the building, you can't, but it gives you a sense of the passage of time. And that was what, both these drawings are evoking, that sensation that we want to create this wonderful space in the bowels of the building where people can meet and congregate. It's in the middle of all of the classrooms, that everybody then shares this participatory space and is looking onto and being looked upon by everybody else. And that community then, is what this building celebrates. So two kinds of drawings again. So the kind of old school handmade drawing, but also then, a much more sophisticated CAD drawing, but saying the same kind of story. And then, of course, you have this, I'll come to later. This is the Bangalore International Center, but this kind of iterative drawing. So that, like Vivek was saying, that, I trained under a person called Fred Cotter, who was a wonderful architect. He passed away around 3-4 years ago. But Fred Cotter really taught us the value of iterative process, just to draw again and again and again and again. And later on in this presentation, you will see a project that I'll show you, Khan's project for the Dominican Mother House, where you can see that he's redrawing again and again the same plan, but tweaking it slightly every single time. And in that tweaking, coming to a completely different resolution at the end, just because of drawing. And at some point, sort of the mind is completely absent, and you're just sort of repeating it, and then something sort of strikes, So that's iterative process. And so at the end of this first section of the presentation, I wanted to show you, this is Sudhir Patwardhan. This is called The City. And so each of us, of course, and with each project, he's like one of these protagonists in Patwardhan's paintings, So the man who's sipping his tea is lost in his own world, thinking about whatever, he's thinking. The man in the bus is sort of probably on the phone, I think, and sort of connected in some other way to his reality. The guy in the bus is looking straight back at us. And so we are his point of reference, his perspective. The guys on the mezzanine are looking somewhere else. And so the point of this presentation is for each of you to find your own gaze, your own way of drawing. So not to look at some other drawings. Of course, you start there, like that woman drawing the silhouette of the man and trying to absorb the qualities of her lover. But you have to sort of try and get to a point where you are developing your own way to look at the world and your own way to internalize the lessons of the world. And so that's what for me, this painting stands for that. The city is made up of all of these different perspectives and points of view. And the coming together of that is what, makes a city. So I'll start with the Glenmarket Masterclass. I'll go through this really quickly. But this I did in 2012. They're still doing it. So if any of you are, able to get the money together, they do give a 50% off if you apply early to, students and architects from India. But if you can, there's nothing better than this. So Calicut, IIA, Calicut chapter and Arjun, you have to figure some way out to get them, your members to go here, because this is the holy grail of sketching. Hands-on experience. So you go there, it's 33 participants. They're from all over the world, and many of them are really, really skilled, because that's, they ask you not to bring a computer and to bring all of your hands. There will be no computer drawing. And so most of the people who come are very well versed. You spend 15 days with these amazing, sophisticated and mature and wise men and women. There were 9 women when I was there. There were 4 Indians, 5 tutors, 4 AIA gold medalists, and of course, Glenmarket himself, the Pritzker Award winner. So it's a fantastic 2 weeks off from reality. So anyway, that's the Glenmarket. So here are the heroes. Richard Leplastia, the great sage, who we've been lucky to have in India twice now. Peter and Richard have come for workshops here. But it is really the coming together of these 5 individuals, along with Uncle Max, the Aboriginal elder, who also guides the process. But to spend time with them is to know that, it's much larger, this idea of being an architect, or, it comes, the concerns are much larger. It's really about humanity and about that ethos of community. I mean, really an amazing, profound experience. So the first beginning, they let you out into the Boyd Center grounds. It's around 3,000 acres of wilderness, Australian wilderness. And for the first few days, you don't know what the hell's going on. Like, aren't they going to teach you anything? I mean, what's the point of the exercise? And so we go out there and you're supposed to put a small building. They give you a program of some 6,000 square feet, a very small building to put somewhere in that landscape, in that 3,000. So you have to find the place where you want to intervene. And how you find that is through this process of just drawing and getting the place into your blood. And so, these are some drawings that I made there. And so the sunrise, it faces east, the Boyd Center. And so this is actually, east facing. This is the Shoalhaven River. And so the sun rises right up against that axis. And it's a spectacular setting. These are the mountains, etc. Boyd's own house, which is in that landscape. And like a good professional, in the first 3 days, I already had a scheme. I was already drawing up the plan. I had the program all worked out, the toilets, everything, the views out, arrows. How you're so confident and you're turning it out. And so we're going to get the model started. The contour model is ready. And so all of these drawings, I started making these amazing drawings. I thought it was, what more, and I remember Merkut, saying during the thing that design isn't, we're all sort of carrying this bag on our shoulders saying that, oh God, I have to get that inspiration, that the genie has to visit me and nothing will happen otherwise. And so we're trapped in this idea of the architectural idea and architectural ego, that somehow I am the one who is going to now, articulate what is of value. When Merkut says this, actually architecture is about discovery. That the more time you spend somewhere, the more time you invest in reading what is existing, the answers will reveal themselves to you. And that's a fantastically liberating, lesson, because it means that I have no pressure. I'm just going to go there with an open mind. I have a book with me and I'm just going to sit there. Of course, where do we have the luxury to do that? But if you did, then meaningful things would come from that process of discovering certain conditions. And so the moment, we had presented that scheme, Peter Stachbury very quietly told me, I think you need to go back out there and spend some more time to understand what the landscape is like. And so to start, that drawing at the bottom is actually Richard's drawing, which tells me that instead of drawing every leaf and every detail, try to understand what the contour of the land is like, to start drawing, to understand that over millennia, these mounds have been formed by the winds and by the water, by the fires, etc. How do you start caressing it, to sort of feel it in your hands, to get it into your blood, and understand what that ground is like? So at the back of the Boyd Center was this amazing sort of sloping terrain with trees sticking out and this kind of falling where the water sort of comes right through. And we started gravitating. We were 6 of us in the group. We started gravitating towards this spot, shaded by these beautiful eucalyptus trees embedded in the forest in the back. And in that sort of terrain, we started trying to figure out what we would do in that terrain. Would we sort of make a big statement of our building so that it's projecting out, like we've seen so many beautiful projects, sitting out proud of the landscape and sort of just a platform from which to then view? Or are we going to straddle that so that the contour sort of is slipping past underneath it, and here's the sort of terrace on which then, or are we going to do that, which is to sort of sculpt our building along those contours and create as little of an imposition as possible on that landscape? And so through various iterations of drawing this out, we started gravitating towards the third option. And so we found these two contours. So one was connected to Arthur Boyd is the artist whose site this is. And so he has a community center and his own studio and his house. He's no more. And so we got these two contour levels from the contour plan, one tied up to the sort of to the studio, the other one tied up to the house. And we said, what if we just use these contours to then tell us how to occupy this ground? And so we extracted those two contours. We started sculpting our sort of inhabited space up against those, so that there were places to then to use for this building, and slowly sort of created these retaining walls which trapped the contour coming in, and off of those retaining walls we created these roofs, which then were places for the small museum that they were proposing. And so really a very, very subtle imposition with these floating roofs that then were just placed in particular places. We had also worked out the enclosure for these, I mean, in very, very sort of rough terms. But I really enjoyed the fact that we landed somewhere where it was so different from where we'd started. And this came through the process. Of course, we love this drawing, which is the drawing that shows Mercut's building on the left, Boyd's buildings in the middle, and as if to complete that diagram is this, building, which then is completely embedded in its context and in the contours that make it possible. So it was a wonderful 2 weeks, where we landed at this without coming to it right at the beginning, that it came through this iterative process with the others and with the tutors sort of guiding us. So this is the power of just observing, drawing, and then coming to something over the course of time. The next project is a small school that we did here some years ago, and this school is really about collaboration. And so if you would bear with me, I just want to read this. This is David Chipperfield writing in the Venice Biennale. He says, architecture requires collaboration, and most importantly, it is susceptible to the quality of this collaboration. So we need to be ready for the collaboration, but the client also needs to be ready, the contractor, the whole team, all of us, this sort of group that we've got together. The quality of the collaboration is what then the output, that it will depend on that. So it is difficult to think of another peaceful activity that draws on so many diverse contributions and expectations. It involves commercial forces, social vision, etc., etc. It must deal with the wishes of institutions and corporations and the needs and desires of individuals. So we're straddling all of these scales when we're doing architecture. Whether we articulate it or not, every major construction is an amazing testament to our ability to join forces and make something on the behalf of others. And of course, the Calicut group of architects, this is nothing new to you guys. You've been working in this kind of environment, managing all of these stakeholders, and really meaningful things come only from the ability to do that, to bring people together and to do something together with others. Good architecture doesn't happen naturally. And this is the best line of the piece. It says it requires a conspiracy of circumstances and participants. So both of these things have to align, the stars have to align, and then something meaningful happens. So while architects can provide ideas and vision, the relevance of these ideas depends on the meaningful engagement with the society they presume to serve. And so society, but also our clients as a microcosm of society. So our engagement with our projects needs to be in the spirit of collaboration. And so thinking of the school, of course, we come immediately to Khan and of course to our forebears about what a school is. The man under the tree, of course, all of you have heard the great quote from the great man. But we ourselves in our tradition are thinking about this, right? So Tansen is going to meet his guru, Akbar is behind him. The guru sits under a beautiful tree, benign wind sort of flowing through, and great words are exchanged, and the holy music is then transferred from the great sage to the people. And so how do you create an environment that is comfortable, shaded, and allows this kind of exchange without really, planning for it? So Khan says beautifully that the teacher doesn't know he's the teacher. The students don't know they're students. You're just shooting the breeze outside in the canteen because it's a nice place to sit. And the profound lesson is revealed to you in that sort of chance encounter. So this is a beautiful sort of message for a school. And so we always thought about that. And then here, thanks to Kavita and her team at Neve, we were able to deploy this central idea of what the school is as a participatory space, not so much about the classrooms and prescribed instruction, but of all kinds of places in between these classrooms that then have shade and cover so that the rains you're protected from the rains, but there's wind and you're also protected from the sun. But all of these terraces, different scales, etc., that you would have a beautiful environment inside under this shaded roof to then occupy and enjoy. So, of course, we worked on this idea of a mat. So we make a grid so that we know the basic module of the classroom forming that grid. And then using that grid, we start modulating or manipulating that grid so that the lower floor and upper floor are slightly misaligned. And through this manipulation, you find open space. It's an old idea. Hermann Hertzberger's projects are a great example of this kind of exercise where you create, or Aldo van Eyck, where you create, or IIM Bangalore, where there's a mat, and in that mat, then you add or subtract things to create gardens and places for occupation. And so creating a very simple plan from that grid, but removing and adding things so that you would get gardens in there, water in there, places to congregate, and all of them modulated in section as well. So there were larger places, smaller places, because some kids like to perform, other kids are much quieter and need smaller places to sort of really flourish. And so the school has all of these different kinds of spaces that then is under this floating roof. So there, the section on the top is really the first section that we drew, which had this beautiful roof above and this sort of serrated, undercroft, which then is got landscape and has all the breezes, etc. Some sketches of that. So and one of the early drawings of the building itself with this beautiful roof above it and all of these terraces and really thinking about it like so many of Mohi's buildings, that the moment you come into this building, you feel that you're part of this community of people, that you're seeing people on terraces, on balconies, that they're all partaking of. And today, in fact, in the morning, I was there because we're making a small addition on the roof, and all the teachers have come back to school and they were all having their breakfast in various parts of this building. And it was so nice to see, especially in the light of what we've had for the past 2 years, not a soul in those buildings. And now after a long while, there are people in there. So again, some sketches just articulating what the forms are like, how deep and what that shaded area within is, and finally coming to sort of the iteration at the bottom, which is what we finally built with this kind of very low canopy roof on the front, where you enter the building and then from there you cross over a water threshold to the inner sanctum of the building under the roof. So here's an axonometric again to just illustrate what those in-between spaces of the building are like, and some sketches. These were sketches that we'd shown the client to tell them what these environments would be like in terms of scale. That we would have these sort of sunken slab soffits, exposed concrete, and so there would be certain places which had a much lower scale and other places which had much higher scale. And so different kids with their natures would gravitate towards different places to then occupy and enjoy. So here's another with that sort of canopy roof on top, but this central space which has had all kinds of uses, from TT table tournament to book selling activities to yoga sessions to storytelling. So it's a completely flexible space that they've used over time. So just a quick some images, not spending too much time on the photographs, but just the place itself and these terraces and that wonderful roof above, which then gives you all the light, gives you all the air, but shades you from the light. The next project is Nalanda University, and this really is rooted in the idea of what is context. And so, of course, Heidegger, I'm not going to read Heidegger, but this piece, I would urge you to try and dig it out. It's free to download online, the origin of the work of art. And what he tells us about this in this particular piece is about architecture as a way in which to give presence to everything that is around us. So the presence of the ground, but also the presence of the rains, presence of the storms, of the sea raging, that in its static and constant nature, in a way, it gives heightened experience or heightened understanding of all of the things that are changing across us. So the changing time, the changing, conditions of weather, that the building in its static condition is giving us a sense of all of the sort of tempestuous and changing conditions around. So it's a wonderful way to think of architecture as a way to give presence to context. We usually think of it as a recessive or as a reactive condition where we are reacting to the context. But what Heidegger is saying is that your building should actually bring to bear the hidden conditions and structures of that context, which maybe aren't revealed when your building is in there. That's a wonderful way to think about it, that it isn't really just a benign background exercise. It's something that gives presence to things that may be hidden. And these may be anything, social conditions, political conditions. You want to give, and that's why Korea's work is so important, because it gives presence to the idea of democracy, the idea of equity. The buildings reveal to us what it is to be better than ourselves, like Kala Academy. And that's what Heidegger is talking about. And so in Nalanda, this is the original Nalanda campus. And we were really, Graham Morrison of Allies and Morrison, this is a project we did together. that we went to Nalanda, and of course, it completely shook us up because we saw here what, of course, Khan did much later, which is to use these archetypal forms. So very, very simple modular forms, but set in the context in very particular ways, navigating geology and navigating the context and the contours, etc. So there were these subtle shifts between these blocks. And so the in-between spaces of all of these buildings was really, really quite amazing. Of course, also the heft of this brick, that it seemed like it could never, that it was geological, that somehow it had been there since, you know, and of course it has been there since time immemorial. But to make an institution that had that kind of heft and presence and robustness, and in fact, you know, again, Sangath Vastu Shilpa Consultants won the project, and I don't know if you guys have seen some of those images, but it evokes that sensation of permanence, you know, of a building that has been there forever. I mean, Rajiv's buildings are stupendous in terms of their scale and monumentality, that they seem archaic, you know. And really, we were also thinking in the same lines to make something that seemed archaic, that seemed like Nalanda when we went there. But also the image on the left, you can see that all of these interstitial spaces. So hold on, I'll show you some pictures. This is the site itself. This is Alfredo's drawing of the site. But also the site had all of these villages around it, the train track at the bottom. And so our project really was a way to connect all of these. So the drawing is a way to register that there are all of these different communities and transportation networks, that maybe our site is offering us the opportunity to make crossings and connections through our site, you know, and across. We didn't win the competition. Right after the competition, they started building I think it is a 6 or 7 meter tall wall all around the campus. And so it was wishful thinking to imagine that that would ever have been allowed. But that was our central premise, that we would make this an urban campus. So there are the villages and this flat 500-acre site. And these are first drawings, Graham's first drawings after coming back to Bangalore. And these are beautiful drawings because especially the drawing on the right-hand side. So there's the site profile you can see. And already Graham is understanding a fundamental condition of the site. He's understanding that the site is a very long site and you probably have multiple nodes in that site. But he's also registering that on the south side of the site, you know, he's got these jagged lines. And on the south side of the site are actually the mountains, the Rajgir mountains, which sort of are looming at the back. And so there is a different notion of what is on the north side and what is on the south side of the site in terms of prospect and in terms of refuge. And so the plan already does two fundamental things, or the drawing already does two fundamental things, which then organized our plan at the end. This notion of a different condition on the south, a different condition on the north, and the idea that there would be multiple nodes in the site. So these are some of the sketches that, you know, we had made going on Graham's initial responses. And also the idea that you would then, from a very, very sort of defined central core of the campus, that you would come out to these fingers that then received all the water from the mountains, and that they would collect in these pools between all of the housing, which was sort of at the peripheries of the plan. So these are some more drawings which tell you about this central articulated spine, which had housing and schools and everything mixed up together. So there was really an urban spine. And on the peripheries, these fingers that went out into the mountains. These are Kiran's drawings, Kiran Kumar from WCFA, but he used to work with us. And these are incredible drawings which tell you about the quality of that central spine and these bursts like Jahangiri Mahal, that from that internal, you know, quality, you would suddenly come into this plaza and have, you know, the big money shot, you know, that you would suddenly reveal, you know, the mountain, but you would go through these, you know, passages of very tight constrained spaces to very large open, you know, platforms. And then maybe across those open platforms were, you know, the seminal sort of community buildings, so that they had something to do with the big view. This is again Kiran's beautiful drawing. We also had at some point toyed with the idea of creating what Utzon called, you know, the South American sort of pyramids, that you would have this big brick mound in the middle of our project. And so you would get up onto this mound and for a moment be the king of the world, you know, that you would come up over the horizon and then be able to survey and control everything you own or everything that you see. So the double sort of, articulated spine with the two nodes. And these are Graham's beautiful drawings from the original sort of grid plan with the central pedestrian route. That plan being distorted because of the shape of the site and the contours and other things, so that the plan then, the sort of grid starts getting modulated. That modulated grid is then occupied with big blocks and streets. Some of those blocks then are filled in. Number 4 is filled in with special buildings, with community buildings, so that in that mat, you would have these special moments as you walk through that spine, so that it was easy for wayfinding. It gave you a sense of place as you moved through. And then, of course, the number 5 is the plan itself, which shows you that central spine with these objects that then are strewn across that central spine. But the trajectory is so clear. And really with Allies and Morrison, this was the big lesson for us. We worked with them on 3 projects so far. And really it is this kind of clarity that from just reading things, absorbing it, and then coming to a diagram which succinctly captures what the general propositions are for the campus. This is an amazing drawing from Allies and Morrison. The program was really, really elaborate for the 500 acres. And what they had done with the program was that they had compiled it. There were 7 schools in the program. So they divided up all the program into 7 bins. So if there were 50 housing units, you would get 7, 7, 7, 7, in each of these buckets. And then they organized the plan using this as the module. So this 70 meter by 70 meter square, which contained a 7th of the program with one of the schools, became the organizing principle for the whole campus, that each of these modules then were organized in that campus. So this is the crossroads idea, which Alfredo suggested. This is that dichotomous, site plan, which then looks out and has prospect to the hill and has much more enclosed and refuge-like conditions on the north, and then certain kind of density so that you would have protection against the sun, but it also gave you a sense that you were in an urban place. And so these drawings are evoking that quality of being really in a tight-knit urban fabric like we're familiar with in so many parts of India. And also the notion that Nalanda was telling us, and of course Khan as well, that we would use very simple building forms so that they were not really articulated or iconic in the fashionable way that we now think of them. That they were very simple buildings organized around corridors and courtyards, but then in the way that they were occupying the site, that they created interstitial spaces that were very much more sort of interesting than the buildings themselves. That really these places for occupation that are outside the building, very much like Neve, that really it's the in-between sort of juice that is of more importance. Almost 1 hour now. How are we doing with time, Arjun? Are we?
Let's go on. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, we are just about an hour, so we have time.
Okay. I'm going to skip through these last images. These are some of the renderings. You can see the Rajgir Hills in the background, but look at the way in which they've chosen to render these images. This is paper plane again, a picture plane. Sorry. It's just amazing because it evokes that sense of something that's archaic, that has been there, forever, and really trying to sell that idea of something that has come out of, the brick and the soil of that. This is an amazingly rich clay area, so you get great brick, all of this, along the river, and so this idea of, and then system of rules and family of buildings. I mean, these are just diagrams. The next is the idea of drawing over and over again, this idea of timeless and temporal. So this is another essay that I would urge you to I'm sure some of you have read it, this traditional and the individual talent. And he's asking us what makes for a writer, to be traditional in the true sense. Traditional in the sense that one is aware of history, one is aware of the work that one does on the larger narrative of history, but one is also aware of today, about our contemporary times. And really our work as architects is a way to bring these two things together: the idea, the knowledge of history, the knowledge of what has been built before, what the timeless qualities of those things are, but also a real understanding of our current predicament, climate crisis, our social and political challenges, the current way that we build things, etc. And to somehow bring these two together. And of course, oftentimes we are much more concerned about our contemporary problems and we forget that history too has to sort of inform the way we respond. And so Eliot's essay is an essential text in that regard. This is a small retail building that we recently finished, but here, evoking a history of the site in a way. This is on an old industrial site. It's a very linear site, and so these were all sort of linear sites that the Bangalore, industrial body had given out for small-scale industries. And this was a site that then, had been sold. There were traces of that old industry left, some walls, etc., that were still there. And originally, of course, the idea was to demolish everything and to create this new building in its wake, in its place. But, when we were drawing it right from the beginning, we wanted to evoke the qualities of these industrial sheds, with their relentless sort of simple structure. So our first, off the top of our head, the first reaction we had was to make a steel building, a metal building. And so you can see that even in these early drawings, that there's always this notion of a sort of structure on which the building is organized, and that everything then is a result of that structure. You can also see in most of these buildings 3 trees which we didn't want to cut, and so they become essential conditions which we want to sort of make sure that we're registering every time we draw the plan. So this notion of the factory, the notion of the landscape, and the notion of this kind of linear site, which then helps us discover again the history of this site. And so here's another drawing again telling us about that structure, that you open out to the back with farming at the back. There's a large area at the back, and this kind of really simple building that is occupying this landscape. So really then the building, if the structure is very simple, if the building is very simple, really the articulation is on the floor. And so we were really concerned about what the floor is going to read like, and how that floor then gives you a sense of transition from one place to the next. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about what the floor materials are, how you transition, etc., etc. And so that becomes really the experience. And so materials, of course, water, all of these conditions that then one would articulate. And so as we're going, plan by plan, again, iterative, plan by plan, the deepest part of the site is on the left-hand side in the corner there. And so to drag also all of the water back to replenish the water table at the back there. So how do we articulate the landscape? Some of this hasn't been done yet, but to articulate the landscape in a way to physically show the way that water is finding its route to the subterranean chambers. And so, this is slowly sort of taking shape. That same plan, that we saw here, slowly taking shape, creating, these notions of simple, porous, systematic structure. And then embedded in that systematic structure are these objects which then are made out of a different material. And so by making that juxtaposition between a very heavy mass with this very light metal frame, you give the metal frame even more sort of porosity and even more refinement. We worked with Manjunath on this, BL Manjunath, the very well-known structural engineer. And it's really, I mean, to be absolutely honest, it's a collaboration between the two offices, because so much of this delicacy of structure comes from Manjunath's own sort of refined sense of how structure gives us experiential sort of quality. So this is the plan, and really to sort of you can see that the plan has these are the components of the plan. So the grid of that metal structure, which then is relentless, you experience it, you come into it, but then offsetting it are all of these heavy objects, all made out of. So the front wall is the old gable end wall of the factory, which we retain. So you transition through that, it gives you a sense because of the contrast of the lightness of the building. And then embedded within the building itself are the toilets and the kitchen and all of the back of house areas which service this building, which then are rendered in this very, very heavy masonry sort of quality. So the drawings are of many kinds. You have those kind of hand drawings, but then this is an important exercise as well. So Manjunath used to, spend a lot of time with Divyang, who worked on this project. Anna and Divyang were the project architects on this. And they spent hours and hours with Manjunath. Manjunath, of course, is a wonderful engineer, but sometimes it is a little difficult to get drawings from his office. And so I hope he's not on this call, but anyway, our Divyang and Anna would spend time with him, of course, I'm sure they take a lot more than, from him than they would admit. I mean, he really guided them to make then these drawings, which are every single, I mean, there are lots of drawings, a lot of 4 or 5 sheets like this, which are every single junction, that then, because it's all sort of, he calls it structural weaving, and they're all made out of plates and angles rather than box sections and things like that. So they're all fabricated with very, very light elements that then are stable only when they come together as a system. So on their own, they're not very stable elements, but as they come together and the building, then it's like building an arch that till the keystone isn't there, the thing doesn't work. And so these things all have to tie together, coming together in interesting ways to then create that sort of rigidity, fixity, as Manju himself calls it. And so this is one kind of drawing. And then there are these drawings. This is Divyang again, just drawing his idea of what it would be to inhabit, this internal space. So to draw all of these pieces of furniture, to understand or to imagine how they would be sort of, over time occupied. And really, if you go there now, the inside of the shop is very much like that. It's like coming into, because of the relentless nature of the structure, that all of this is forgiven. You can do whatever you want within this sort of generous democratic space. This is a small, that sort of curvy building that houses the kitchen. But again, to look at where the staircase is, to make the staircase then a really particular sort of, a point in that building. So different ways in which that staircase could be organized to then make it the beacon at the end of that long passage. So if I just go back to the plan, it's basically at this end of that, on the left-hand side of that curvy building, which then is splayed open, so that as you come through the grid, the splay then forces you to even come further to see what's beyond, and then suddenly discover, the beautiful garden that then is at the back of this building. And then, of course, the facade. This is a great story. So we were going to demolish everything, and we were really struggling with the facade of this building. So the facade faces a very, very busy street. There are 3 days in that facade, and so originally, the client said we'll get a beautiful old door from Jaisalmer or Jaipur somewhere and fix that. And so they had a door which we were trying to fix there. There were various iterations of it, and this was at some point to the facade of the building, and none of us liked it. But we were really struggling. And then Divyang and Anna, both of them suggested that we do something a little bit more like to heighten the precise nature of the steel building. You heighten it by putting something really rough and ready up against it, some kind of rough masonry. Maybe there's landscape growing on top of it. Always, thinking that we have to bring to bear this notion of that, of design. We completely didn't see the old wall. We didn't see, the factory building. We were just going to wipe it all out and create, something which was already there. And so we made all of these drawings, trying to figure out how we would make this wall, how we would evoke this quality. But eventually just leaving that wall is what then gave, everything to this project. And in fact, now anybody who goes there only talks about the wall and nobody talks about our building. They said, that's such an amazing idea that you left the wall. And this came so late in the day, while we were demolishing it. And so you can see that the building, that the wall is half demolished, and we've just left it like that. We've put a sort of sealant coat on the brick. And so that then is the main idea of the building, that you have the old factory building, you have the trace of the end gable wall of that building, and then you have all of these brick bits which then form the inner core of that. So as you come into the building, you can see the metal structure and these brick objects which then heighten the quality of slenderness and porosity of the metal. And that conversation, really learning from Scarpa and people like that, by juxtaposing these opposites, you heighten the sensation of something else. Again, to go back to Jahangiri Mahal in terms of light and shade and robustness versus lightness. So some more pictures of the building. I'm skipping the photographs. You guys can see it online. And the last, I think this is the last thing. I'm going to end this real quick. Arjun, just maybe another 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah, no issues. No issues.
Yeah, okay. This I'm going to skip this.
There are quite a few questions, so we'll keep some time for the interaction as well, but 10 minutes is fine. Yes.
Okay. So this is a Khan's project. I'm going to skip through this. You guys have to read this book. So I'm just going to show you this book. And please, if you can find it, buy it immediately. It's an amazing book because it tells you about Khan's own struggle to find the plan for the mother house, and it shows you that even the great man is struggling, and he's doing all of these iterations, and it tells you that the great idea doesn't come from the individual. It comes through the pressures of budget, the pressures of the site, his own people at the office contributing. And so it's a really precious volume of drawings which tells you about how architecture is made, that iterative and sort of really sometimes frustrating process of coming to something meaningful over time. So I'm going to skip through all of the Dominican Mother House and come straight to BIC, which I think is the last project. Hold on. Ooh. Okay, so I'm skipping that. So this is BIC. This is a competition entry. So this was our competition entry scheme. And really, this is the central image of the competition scheme. So it has this kind of floating mass on top with the accommodation. There's hotel rooms. And at the bottom on the left-hand side is the auditorium, which was submerged and sort of put into the ground. And on the right-hand side was the library and the seminar rooms. So all of the primary functions of the building clearly articulated in the form of the building. And between the accommodation on the top and these subterranean, program components was this big plinth, a terrace, which in some sort of really powerful rhetorical way expressed the BIC's public mission. And so when, Mohe was on the jury, he said that immediately, it captured essentially what the BIC was about, this kind of open free space that then, the city could project its aspirations onto. And when you were up there, like on Utsam's platform, you were then empowered because of that vantage you had over the city. So this was our competition, board, the building itself. One of the BIC members thought that it looked like the Starship Enterprise. He wasn't being complimentary. And there's the building in all of its glory. And then, of course, the site dimensions changed, and we lost like 6 meters in the front of the site. And so the whole thing had to be scrapped. We had to lose a floor, and of course the floor without any program got cancelled from the whole scheme. And so that plinth disappeared overnight, like it was the first thing that was cancelled. And so we really struggled for some time in how to understand what this building was about. And so from that sort of rhetorical flourish, we started thinking that the public space of the building had to be inside the building. It had to be experienced and lived by people who came into this building, and rather than being sort of at a remove away from the main sort of life of the building. And so we started thinking of some kind of a frame within which then was a very, very articulated section, that sketch on the top, which you can see, this kind of box, but inside it is this really wonderful life that exists. And so here are some more sketches which show you, initial ideas of what that would be like. We thought that maybe that whole frame could be a green wall, and that you would have traces of what the life was like inside. We had all of these drawings done. But in all of these schemes, we were entering the building in the middle of the plan and then going to program on either side. So we were really struggling with the idea of an internal environment and using the same plan that we had before. So kind of, and then this sketch where we shifted the entry to the left-hand side of the plan. And so now, because it was on one end of that long site, the circulation had to go across to connect all of the various programs. And in that, this idea of a promenade within the building, we discovered what was the central sort of organizing principle of the BIC. So this kind of long, elongated, circulation spine, which we started removing all the program from it, and so from the first scheme to the last scheme, you can see that there's so much more public space. We brought the restaurant down to the ground floor so that now you felt like the ground floor, other than the auditorium, was completely open and connected to the landscape. So here's a drawing which shows you that wonderful promenade, and this beautiful drawing by Divyang, which during the heydays, BIC is open now and they've been having hybrid events, limited seating, etc. But in the old days, I mean, it was just an amazing place to be. I mean, just filled with people, all kinds of events that you couldn't miss. There's Nasruddin Shah one night, Ram Guha is speaking another day. There's, Girish Karnad's memorial is going on another day. It's like just a packed series. And so that's the other thing, that you build these things, you hand it over, and the real life of the building happens after that, that someone has to take it and run with it. The stakeholders or the curators, there needs to be stewardship for all of these public buildings, without which it's really meaningless. Architecture means nothing when you don't have a real sort of embrace from community. So here are some of sketches of that wonderful frame. So I'll give you a little bit of a cheat sheet on this. So the frame in the front, look at Caesar, look at the portfolio, Caesar's portfolio, and you will see where this comes from. But we thought that in that residential neighborhood, that we would introduce this kind of frame which gave the building a certain presence, but then we would corrupt that frame so that when you came closer to the building, the frame was occupied with all kinds of different things, and that its scale was kind of corrupted by all of its inhabitation. So this is a beautiful drawing, again talking about that kind of the juxtaposition of a very, very severe frame, but with a very, very porous and ambiguous internal environment. Suruti's beautiful drawing, which captures immediately that essential condition that you go through those doors for the first time and you're completely surprised by what you confront, because it's nothing like what you anticipated from outside the building, just the section and that world of terraces inside the building. So there's that sort of robust outer frame, all made in concrete, almost opaque, intransigent. You can't really sort of go through it, but the moment you're inside it, it's this really warm world with all kinds of levels of terraces and light streaming in all the time. And then the auditorium itself, terraces above, etc. And that, so the competition scheme on the top with that isolated public realm, and our build scheme, which then is all about that internal life, so that you always are experiencing it within the building. So I'm going to end with this. These are sort of 4 fundamental questions about drawing from Michael Merrill's wonderful book. So the first one is the relationship between the lifespan of our artifacts. So we build things thinking that they're going to last 200 years, at least according to Ruskin, but we spend 3 months on it. So shouldn't the lifespan of the artifact have something to do with the gestation or the amount of time you spend thinking about it? So that's the first question. The second thing is, we've got all of these tools now, but do those tools and our ability to reflect and conceptualize, are we able to think that fast? So there's often, this discussion about drawing versus drawing on the computer, that when you're drawing a line, you're drawing a line. It takes some time because by the end of making the line, you've now planned the next step. Whereas in the computer, the line is instantaneous, right? You're getting it so much quicker. Are you ready now with your next move? The computer is constantly challenging you. Like, come on, now what? Now what? And so are we able to keep pace with these tools that we have? And in fact, this is the promise of modernity, that somehow in the future, all of us would be people of leisure, that we would have time to read books, go to movies, travel, make sketches. And unfortunately, the more and more we get into practice with our new tools and our new methods, we seem to have less and less time and less space to do anything. So there must be some fundamental problem with this. How come the promise of modernity, the promise that everybody gave us, that none of it is true? We're just not able to operate. And the last one is that he makes this amazing connection, and Khan's buildings, of course, most of you have seen the beautiful buildings in Ahmedabad. Some of you have gone abroad and seen those buildings. But there is a quietude. You come into the building and immediately everything is slowing down. That this idea of timelessness, that you feel that now I have time. Now I can sit and draw for some time and I feel okay. And so he's making that connection, that this idea of quietude is connected to the slowness of their conception. That is there perhaps a connection between this kind of slow process and this kind of quiet building, a building that isn't making the Instagram move, it's making something that is going to take you some time to understand, oh my gosh, this is what, like you go to IIM, and every time you go to IIM Bangalore, Doshi's building, you're like, oh my God, is this what really it is? How is it working? And great buildings do that. They invite you to come again and again to discover what it is about them. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Vijay sir. Thanks a lot for this.
Unbelievable, Vijay. Unbelievable. Truly inspiring.
Yeah, very inspiring session actually. So I think now it's time to take up the Q&A session, and I would like to welcome architect Afnan, Joint Secretary IIA Calicut Center, to take up the Q&A session. Afnan, bye. Over to you.
Hi, Vijay sir. I never thought that, a sketching session, end up like this, or start up like this and end up like this. And I really wanted to say that this is not enough and we need a workshop. And I'm sure that
Exactly.
that's what actually
I'm planning.
Absolutely.
Right.
Actually, I'm planning it, and from today itself, you'll get a call, sir.
Yeah, no, I think we kept it as a surprise for the audience. So we are announcing this is a curtain raiser.
Okay, see you guys. Thank you. It was very nice to meet all of you.
Okay. So, sir, I'll just run through the questions. There are so many things which personally I wanted to ask. I'll definitely ask you personally. But again, I'll just go through the questions to make it fast. The first question was, by Nihad. Has technology really taken over hand sketches? What's the message to young generation to get back to the sketches? What's your take on it?
So, see, I'm not very well versed with technology, and I would like to believe that, those who aren't drawing at all by hand are connected to the making of architecture in some other way that I don't understand. And so, I don't want to dismiss, the way a lot of architecture is produced today, that you would do things on the computer straight away, or that you would model them, or you would, use a 3D printer, whatever. I mean, there are so many modes by which people are observing the world and imagining the future. So I don't want to dismiss anything. I mean, it's just not the way that I have learned to think and to understand things. That drawing, I mean, there's a wonderful book by Palasma called The Thinking Hand. For those of you who have who are not that keen on drawing, take a look at that book, because there are certain the biggest lesson from the book is the idea that you build muscle memory in your hand when you draw, or when you make things with your hand. That somehow, if, for instance, to get proportion right, or to get scale right, or to know how much to make something in plan or section, that if you have drawn Kovilagams, or if you've gone to temples or gone to historic buildings that you like, that just in the act of drawing, like that first image that I showed you, that you're somehow internalizing these things, so that when you make your own plan, that that 8 feet would just be right, or that it has to be 9.5 feet, or somehow your hand is now driving that process. And of course, I'm not saying that I'm able to do that, but you do see that over time. Now I'm 50 years old, and so some things are coming easier for me now than they were before. And I would like to think that it's because of this familiarity with the historical precedent, or drawing other people's buildings, to just something that you like. If you like, one of Vivek's beautiful house that you've done in Chennai, what is that plan? How is it organized? What's the thickness of that living room? Just yesterday, I was drawing out Palinda's, artist retreat, just to get a sense of in section. I don't know if you know that building, but that living room is only 5 meters. I mean, it's not very large, but when I went there, I thought it was much larger. And so this is, when you're drawing it, you suddenly understand that there's some other game going on, because of the way you approach something, the way you see it from a distance, that these are all games that architects are playing, with section and plan.
Sure.
So I would say that, read The Thinking Hand and give it a shot. If you're not convinced, try it. Maybe, something will click, something that all of us oldies seem to be talking about constantly. Yeah.
That's the biggest takeaway, actually, I think everyone will be having today. The next question, I just wanted it's a curious thing. I was going through your all the drawings, and we have seen different style and different lines. There are styles of actually sketching. One thing which I noticed when it went to the plan details, I could actually have a reflection of Baba's drawings. So I want to know that, is there any kind of inspiration you have taken from Baba's drawings? Because he normally do that. I mean, the way he practiced, we have seen in a lot of books, the way he sketched the plan and the things. What's your thing on that?
Yeah, of course, Baba's, not so much Baba's, but Lucky's drawings, Lucky Senanaike, who made all of those beautiful drawings that are in Baba's book. Baba himself used to sketch and things, but really the iconic images are the ones that Lucky made. The especially for, I would say, especially for Kerala or any place where the landscape and these transitions are really important. The definition of that sort of gap between what is the inside world and what is the outside world. And all of the great buildings, in Kerala are talking about how you handle that transition. And Baba's drawings really, or Lucky's drawings, are all about that transition between inside and outside and what that outside world is like. So I think that the drawings are beautiful in and of themselves, but they're also evocative of a way of inhabiting place, So in fact, a lot of the drawings will have, Baba's Rolls Royce or his beautiful chairs, or, there'll be all of these quirky little details, which immediately tell you that, Lucky is thinking about how he's going to sit in the evening and, have his whiskey and look out the window. And then across the street is this wonderful, a view of the river. That it gives you a sense, especially the Lunuganga drawings, they're evoking the notion of being in this Italian garden, So the drawings are, the north sign is a particular way, that they're all about bringing to bear what is it I want to do? What is the nature of the place? Khan's beautiful, this notion of form and design. So form is the idea that you have an abstract that I want to build this beautiful retreat on the edge of the river and be able to sit in the evening, have the sunset, have my whiskey, and be able to be absolutely quiet in that environment. And so how do I get there? What is the way in which I will handle the landscape? What would I do with the topography? What do I want to see across the river? Baba famously bought that little house across the river and painted it so that you wouldn't see it from his living room. So, it's really sort of thinking about experience. And so these drawings evoke that quality of that landscape and the thresholds. So yes, Baba's drawings are really, Lucky's drawings are instrumental.
Thank you, sir. The next one, Amjad, he's asked, in your practice, which is that exact moment you start scribbling on paper for a project? Is it after site visit or doing site visit?
There isn't a rule. Sometimes while the client has come to give the first, he's come to meet us and he's given us a plan or something. Sometimes something that he says triggers something, and you're trying it out. You're pulling all the books out of the library. You're trying to see, maybe something, it triggered some image of some project that you want to see how that is organized. So really, I mean, it is important, of course, to assimilate everything from the site, because sometimes what you've drawn on that first meeting, you go to site and you realize that there is some condition that isn't working like that, the way you imagined it. But that doesn't stop us from sketching or drawing even early on, even before visiting. Yeah, so there isn't a rule per se.
Okay. So the next question is by Vivek. Do you still work on all projects through sketching iterations?
For most part, yes. So usually what happens is that apart from maybe, actually all projects, usually the first few drawings are done by a few people. So, either I'm making, the first sort of just organizing the program, or putting something, or someone, one of the senior people is doing that, sort of just laying out the program so that we get a sense of the scale of this commission, that is usually done by hand. So we will lay out the program in AutoCAD, but then we will transfer that onto Buttersheet so that we get a sense of the scale and the site and how all of that is laying out. That's done by hand usually, not on the computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the next one is by a student or something. Okay. What is your take on showcasing hand-drafted plans and sections in a portfolio? Do firms still take an interest in seeing hand-drafted content? What do you think? Like,
we do a lot. Yeah, we really would love to see more drawings by hand and so, there are certain colleges from where we have seen a lot of that. So for instance, IPSA Rajkot, which is a fantastic, they still have traditions that we are very fond of, or SEPT, till very recently. Now, of course, they're going in a slightly different direction. Avani has, you guys do a lot of wonderful, at least the early semesters, there's always interesting, also the not only hand drawing, but anything that's made by hand. So collage, for instance, and that I've seen in Avani a lot, this notion that you would do, the process is like a work of collage, that you would try and put together things. And that's, I think, a really useful way also to imbibe, because again, you're using your hands, you're sort of getting a sense of it. Yeah. Model making, yeah.
That's true. Okay, the next one by again Vivek. How does the clients accept and appreciate full presentations on hand-drawn sketches? Is it
Not
how
very
you?
well. Not very
Yeah,
well.
I know we architects take it very, very inspiring, but then how does they take it? Like they always want to see the 3D, they always want to see the latest software.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, why are you still working on sketches? Where is my 3D? Where is my latest software? Why am I approaching an outdated architect?
Yes, no, it's a very valid question. In fact, our clients are not impressed with hand drawings anymore. They continue to be very impressed with models. So you can, if you have a beautiful model, you will win that argument much easier than if you had a perspective or a 3D rendering. I think a model works really well. So we continue to make a lot of models at every stage, and our clients enjoy that a lot. They really, without an exception. The other thing that we have now started doing a lot in the office with our clients is we've started using VR. So we're doing virtual reality now. And so there are many platforms now where you can just plug in your SketchUp and then inhabit it using an Oculus, with the glasses. That's good and bad. The great thing about this hand sketch is that it's not completely there. No, it's obfuscating some stuff that you haven't resolved yet. It's not giving them a complete picture. Whereas the VR stuff, we've started to understand the client sees everything, which may not be a good thing. That they have, then they have, a reaction to something that may have not been developed completely at that point. So the 3D rendering for us sometimes is a bit of a trap, because they sign on to it, and it may not be something that you've completely figured out yourself, because it's all looking finished, in the 3D rendering. Whereas the sketch leaves enough open-ended so that you can still tweak it till the nth moment, clients don't like that, no. So the answer is no. The clients aren't.
I think your answer, the answer was for Anand Mishra as well, because he was asking regarding VR things. So all together you combined the total thing. And I think almost all the questions are, you have totally answered.
Great.
And I think there are a lot of, of course, this session, whatever you have done, I'm sure that it was supposed to be like 3 or 4 hours session. I feel like, personally, I feel that
Oh,
we
no.
need to take time and understand the things, but still.
Be careful what you wish for.
Vijay, one last question.
Yeah,
Because hit me personally, I am sure there are a lot of youngsters who also may have the same doubt. So we were talking about the slowness of practice, the slowness of conception. And we have seen how your competition projects have come over like 4, 5 years, 5, 6 years. And then 6th year, it is a different iteration.
Right.
And we have even seen your cafe projects of my good friend Radish, the Go Native one.
Right.
And how the iterations came in, and then finally the end product was something else.
Right.
So in every single project that you have really embraced the slowness, how viable is that in the practice? Like, we all the practice is now going for BIM, and then because we wanted products tomorrow, we wanted the products day after tomorrow, and that is how the financial modeling is done. And you're there, totally on a different paradigm, appreciating slowness, but creating beautiful products and beautifully experiential products out of it. How viable out of that is that kind of practice, and what do you suggest? What do you suggest to the youngsters who wanted to take that up?
Well, the 2 projects that you mentioned, BIC and Go Native, it must be obvious to you already that we make no money on those projects at all. In fact, it's a losing proposition. I don't know what to say. Other than to talk sort of philosophically about it. What is your philosophical? What is it that you're trying to? But okay, so here's another way to think about it. So there are big practices like Allies and Morrison or Renzo Piano who do beautiful work, who consistently produce sophisticated work, irrespective of whether it is a small, a regular office building, or, there's something that is unusual or interesting or, new about these projects. And the way that, at least from my experience at Allies and Morrison, we haven't been really very good at it because we're just so slow and we don't have that kind of a bandwidth. But what they do is that they have people in the office who are then working on other things which are subsidized separately. So they are doing projects and they're meeting all their deadlines, etc. But they're deploying into these projects research which is going on independent of the project themselves. So, I mean, this is, I'm talking about it theoretically because I don't know the mechanics of how these big project offices work, but I know that Allies and Morrison have teams in their office who are not working on any project. They're not working on, you know, their mainstream projects. They're researching, well, some guys must be researching some materials. Some guys will be researching, you know, they will be doing some historical research for, you know, some part of the city where maybe, you know, they're going to do a project. So these are independent of the timelines that the projects themselves are tied to. And so independently, and this is the space of the college, you know, so this, what you're doing at Avani, for instance, the stuff that you really want to know, that you are really interested in, you need to find a way to do that independent of the projects themselves, because your clients are not going to pay for that. And so for us, for instance, you know, the BIC and Go Native, hopefully the lessons from those projects will be, we will be able to deploy on some project later on, which we could do quickly. Of course, NEEV, for instance, was done in 6 months. So, I mean, there are other ways, because we have been thinking about schools since we graduated, no? The school is in our blood. And so this idea of the roof and this, I mean, we are always thinking about it. And then here is suddenly the magical, this conspiracy of circumstance and participants that somehow we get the chance to deploy. And so that's what I'm saying, that somehow sometimes you have to do this research independent of your client's time and money. And so that may be the lesson for a young practice, that, you know, try to keep a day in the week aside for your own pursuit, you know, that you're going out there, you're doing your research, and you don't know when that will be of value. You know, you're sketching, like what Arjun is organizing, these sketching trips. Don't look at this as a way to sort of that it is a waste of time, or that nothing comes of it. When am I ever going to make a Kovilagam, or when am I going to make a temple? This isn't the exercise, right? You're trying to build, you know, your skills. You're building your sort of you know, armature as you deploy it in practice. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, the answer is
yeah, more than.
Yeah, yeah.
Afnan, you mute.
Yeah, I think that answered even Khadija's question as well. Yeah. So
Was
I think
Khadija here from Avani, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Yes, sir. Hi.
So I think VP, how do we?
Yeah, we can. What an inspiring session, Vijay. How much ever one hear you, every time it feels so fresh and so inspiring. Yeah, Afnan, please.
Thank you.
So I think we'll end up with the session. It was a very interesting session. Of course, you know, so many things which went in our mind. We all are practitioners. We practice, we learn, and there are a lot of students. And we never thought that this session would turn out in this way. I mean, it is so brilliant stuff. However, thanks a lot, Vijay, to, you know, and taking out your valuable time. And I know that you have prepared it well, and because Vivek was telling that he would have actually prepared it so nicely, kept it so crisp and clear, and of course it will be well. And thanks for that, and thanks for your time. You know, and I think thanks Arjun for organizing and for following up Vijay, you know, to pitch him in and, you know, get him in to do this stuff. And I thank all the, you know, all the people who have attended.
I think we had consistently 100.
Yeah, of course. I'm very happy to know that. And I think more and more, you know, we'll be coming up with new people, new sessions. And, you know, thanks a lot for this great evening. And thanks a lot, Vijay, again, once again. Thank you, everybody from IIA Calicut Center side. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vivek. Thanks, Arjun. Thanks, Afnan. See you guys.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye.